Isco is a name which plenty of you will know about. Typically, when we do these tactical breakdown shows, they're more around younger players that people aren't too educated upon. But Isco is a name that has been around European football at the highest level for quite a while, and yet my views on the player may not come as too much of a surprise to some, but I'm not too keen on the guy. We're going to have a chat to a good friend and a fantastic Spanish football expert in just a second. So let's crack on with it. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show. I'm joined by John Driscoll. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you, Tom. Good to be on again.
I'd say that is the most pathetic Christmas tree behind you I've ever seen.
I should bring the Christmas decorations in here. Generally, just got a pile of unsent Christmas presents.
And a table tennis table from the look of things.
Yes, it is. Yeah. If only my skills match the ownership of the table, but no.
Well, good luck wrapping that in a present for Christmas, for sure. So yeah, Isco. I wanted to get you on and talk about this because I was going to cover Emi Buendia this week, and then this popped up, and there's a lot of kind of split amongst the Arsenal fan base. Now, I don't want to be too prejudgmental in a way, but I think the split is kind of half the fans understand my kind of feeling why I don't want him around his age profile, the type of players that Arsenal have bought in the past, the money that they've spent, sell-on value of players, that type of thing. And then there's another half that go, it's Isco, he's at Real Madrid, he must be really, really good. And we need a creative central attacking midfield type of player. What are your just raw thoughts and feelings around him?
Listen, it's difficult for me, Tom, because I'm going to largely agree with you. But I love Isco. He was one of my favourite players a couple of years ago. An elegant player, skillful, gets on the ball, can beat a man, can play a clever pass, can finish. So in all of those aspects, of course, he's there for this beautiful, elegant player, and we should all love Isco. Right, but Zinedine Zidane has had him all these years, and he just can't find a place for him, and he can't find a role for him. So he's become a bit part player. He's only got 38 caps for Spain. He should have, 80, 90, 100 or something by now with his level of ability. The difficulty is finding a role for him, isn't it? So all of the reservations that you raised, age profile, exactly what he does, they're all things that really should feed into the price. But the reality of players at Real Madrid is that I don't know what Isco's wages are, but it will be an awful lot of money. And so you've got to find a way of all of his limitations, making him, he should be a cheap buy. And his wages shouldn't be huge, but the reality is that it won't be. So if Arsenal are involved in this, Isco's people will be thinking, oh yeah, English Premier League, rubbing their hands together. Whereas I don't think that he will guarantee you enough. And I'm not the Arsenal expert, so when I look at Arsenal, I'm not watching Arsenal thinking this is crying out for Isco. That's not what's coming to my mind. I'm thinking this is crying out for someone better than Xhaka doing Xhaka's job. That's what I think when I'm looking at Arsenal. The nature of some of the goals conceded recently, and I'm thinking, is Isco? What's Isco to add into this? Now, the goal that Arsenal scored against Southampton the other night, very Isco kind of goal. So he could have done either of the bits in the build-up. So running with the ball, drifting past people, the clever touch that was in Nketiah, wasn't it? The clever little touch onto Aubameyang to score. So either of those things are Isco. But limitations are, he's best as a number 10, but who really plays with a number 10, an old-style number 10 who can't quite be a midfielder but doesn't score many goals? Not many people do that. It's quite a luxurious position, and I think you'll find Arsenal fans, and you might have been down this road before, buying players that Real Madrid couldn't find a place for. He's very different from Ozil, by the way, as you well know, Tom. He's not Ozil, but he does play in a similar position, and he's got similar limitations. Now, Isco's a good lad. He when he's on the pitch, he works hard. So he runs around, he puts a tackle in. If you tell him to go and play left midfield, he will play left midfield. If you tell him to play deeper, he'll play deeper. But he's not very good at any of those things. That's the problem. He's no better than Saka at playing on the left side of midfield. So why would you pay a fortune to get him in to do that? If you're going to have Isco, it's because you're going to build a team around him, and you're going to play with a guy with immense talent. Or it would have been best a few years, when City were good 2 or 3 years ago. They should have assigned Isco then. He would have been perfect in that team when they were dominating possession, dominating teams. And then you've got this guy who's got the cutting edge, who can break the defensive lines by skipping through the challenges with his great ability, with his great ball control, with his ability to run with the ball. But looking at a team 15th in the league, struggling to find an identity, struggling with an inexperienced manager, I'm not sure that adding a luxury player into that mix is a sensible move at the moment, which is a shame. Like I say, as everyone who's seen me on this before, I'm not an Arsenal fan. So if Arsenal want to sign him and every game's 3-3 or 4-3, then great. I'm all for it. But if it was my money, if it was my club in Arsenal's situation, I'd think, no, be careful here.
Go elsewhere. And I think that comes down to talking about the age profile. Arsenal have signed these players in their later 20s. We did it in the summer with Thomas Partey. The difference with Partey is, of course, that he is a world-class player in a position that we desperately needed. And we kind of backed that up with the signing of Gabriel, who's a young centre-back who is hitting the ground running here as well. And there is kind of this mix of, you need to find the balance in the market. And Arsenal are losing Mesut Ozil in the summer, as his contract expires, and we need to replace that void that's left through central creativity that we created for ourselves anyway by not putting him in the squad for the season with a younger player. And Isco, being I believe 28 now, would be a signing that we made. I've saw links to around 20 to 25 million pounds, which sounds about right for a player that is unwanted and surplus at Real Madrid. And if you invest that money at a club that typically struggles to invest that level of money frequently in a single window, I don't see many other signings coming in, and I don't see Isco being a transformative figure like I felt that Thomas Partey would have been for the similar sort of age. And if you're going to sign a player of 27, 28, 29 years of age, for me, they need to come in, have an immediate impact and transform that side, especially at the level of Arsenal, going forwards. Now, I don't see Isco doing that. Is that a fair assessment to say that he wouldn't have an immediate impact? Because you talked about how like Arsenal don't necessarily need this type of player yet, but a lot of the fans will turn around and say that Arsenal desperately need someone to be a creator. But I look at Isco more of a ball carrier, kind of a more advanced Dani Ceballos in a way. So is that a fair assessment of the guy? And would he actually not provide the creativity that Arsenal are crying out for?
He could do. Yeah. Like I say, he is a very, very talented player. So don't, let's not do the guy down. He's a brilliant player, and he would probably instantly split Arsenal fans down the middle. That's the truth of it, isn't it?
Quite a few of them.
Yeah, because you would have this, you would have some people who are just looking at. He gets the ball, he drifts past a couple of, and he flicks it off to the side, and some people fall in love with him. There'll be other more mechanical. Sam Allardyce would never pick Isco in a team. Let's put it that way, because he just wouldn't do the efficient parts of the job that you need to put a team together to start picking up points. To say whatever you do, don't come away having watched this thinking that Isco is a bad player or that we don't like Isco. Yeah, similar to Ceballos. But yeah, and you perfectly put it right. Ceballos plays deeper in the pitch. Isco plays further forward in the pitch. You can almost see it if Arsenal were to pursue an interest in Isco as almost doubling down on playing in a style of Arteta wanting. I'm going to chuck another talented ball player from that Spain of 10 years ago school, which it's okay. It's a decision to be made, isn't it? So if that's really what you want, if you want a team full of 5'8" skillful midfielders playing short passing football, then Isco is a one to add into there. He's probably cheaper than he's definitely going to be cheaper than he would have been 5 years ago. But there, I would maintain that there is a downside to this path. There is a danger here in signing Isco. It's not the sensible signing. It's a luxury signing. And if that's what you want from your football team, you pay your money. You're the fans. So, if that's the kind of football that you want, then that's he's the man and he's available and you probably get him.
Okay. I feel like I'm going to put you on the spot when I don't mean to, but if we look into La Liga and you look at kind of the age profile of younger players within that league, and you're looking for kind of creation and someone that maybe is coming from a lesser Spanish side that's not going to cost you a huge amount of money. I'm vamping now to give you more time to think. But what kind of... because you look at, say, Martin Odegaard, who had a really good season at Real Sociedad last year, has come into Real Madrid and hasn't been able to have the impacts that maybe he was. I think he should have spent another year with La Real, to be honest, and carried on at Anoeta. But he's come back and Zidane's tried to play him. And in fact, another kind of strike on the Isco card is that Zidane's preferred to try and put Odegaard into the team in an attacking midfield role, which Isco can fit into. So is there any kind of where in Spain that you would look and think Arsenal could look a younger, Echo in the chat said maybe Carlos Soler, but I don't really look at him as that type of player necessarily, because Soler is weird for me because he plays on the right midfield, then he comes into the central part of the midfield. They lost Ferran Torres, so he's played more out to the right as well. So what players come to mind in this category for you? Not
a vast amount, if I'm honest, Tom. Carlos Soler, I always thought Carlos Soler would end up playing through the middle, but he hasn't, has he, particularly? No. So he would be a more sensible signing. He really would. And obviously Valencia will sell you their granny if you offer a few quid to them at the moment. So, it's definitely worth looking there. Guedes, of course. But I don't know. I find it hard for a team. You've got to know where Arsenal are at the moment. And for a team that needs to get some stability, we're looking at talking about signing that kind of player is a huge gamble, isn't it? You get Taki Kubo on loan. He's been at Villarreal. He's owned by Real Madrid, really talented Japanese international. Big things expected of him because pathetic discussion, but the Asian market profile. Therefore, people are fascinated by him. I don't think it really works that way, but he's hardly played. Good old Unai Emery doesn't want to use
Valencia him as well.
Lee. Yeah. So but I was about to say you shouldn't sign players purely on what market value they bring you, but then it's modern football that we're talking about, and it's precisely the kind of thing that football clubs would think about. So I'm struggling because you wouldn't get away. Some of the, Mikel Merino is one of the most. That's who you should sign at Arsenal. From Real Sociedad.
And the fans would go, "Who the hell is this guy?"
Precisely,
he's a very good player.
Yeah. That and I know this is not the sort of the fantasy football way, is it? It's coming on and advocating that you sign a really good, solid central midfield player. But if it was me, if I was in Arteta's position and my job was on the line. Of all of those Spanish midfielders around at the moment, I said, I just like Merino. And you'd get him as well, I think.
The thing is with La Liga now is I feel like La Liga's kind of gone through this transition in a way over the last 10 years. It's become much more about talented wide players than necessarily what's going on in the centre part of the midfield. You look in Italy and I see more kind of central kind of players now that are gradually developing and growing. And in fact, I suppose Carlos Soler is kind of a cornerstone of that transition from being that central part to the out wide. And then you've seen other Spanish players like Adama Traore leave Spain and go to England. You've seen Ferran Torres go to Manchester City. Is it maybe now we're seeing a transition and there are less creative central players of a really high standard coming from Spain, and actually it's more the wide areas that are growing faster?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I mean, it's a very tactical league at the moment, isn't it, La Liga? And it's the way it's gone. There are lots of good teams in La Liga, and you go all the way down, and even the bottom teams. Who's gone bottom? Osasuna are bottom, but they're solid. And so the days are gone of there being. I mean, there are some very, very, very small teams in there who've got virtually no budget. And so it shows you that and Eibar have still got no money
as well, I suppose.
Yeah. And so it shows you, and it always has shown us in recent years, that you don't need Premier League style of money to run a football club if you recruit properly, if you develop your young players properly. And so, the Premier League clubs chucking money, and yet the standard of the clubs, the standard of the teams in the bottom half is no better than the standard of the teams in the bottom half. The Sheffield United will be getting relegated from La Liga. That's the notion that someone like Burnley had wiped through La Liga is just nonsense. But what it does mean at the moment, it's not necessarily. There isn't a great team, and there isn't thrilling football being played. In truth, I think I watch a lot of games now, and they're tactical and well organised. good level of coaching throughout, intelligent players throughout, and so so picking out really individual glittering star players is hard. And I know we love to do it, and I know that's the business of transfers is greatly exciting, and Sky do that massive thing on a transfer deadline day and all of that.
Yeah.
For the future growth of your club, it probably shouldn't be transfer deadline. You shouldn't ever sign anyone on transfer deadline day. You should be slowly, cleverly developing and and making consistent progress. But easier said than done.
The last player I'll ask you on is someone that's in the chat. Daniel Roberts says Mikel Oyarzabal, as he's more of like not luxury in terms of like Isco, but luxury in terms of price. He would be expensive, but he is an amazingly talented footballer. Yeah,
very good. I don't want to be rude. Don't want to come into your backyard and be rude. I don't think you're going to get him. That's the truth of it.
I think say that about Partey.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. To be fair to Arsenal, they waited out everybody else for Partey, didn't they? Yeah. Very talented, left-sided. He does the old the penalty technique that Bruno Fernandes does, and so he scored a few goals. Yeah,
skip and jump. Yeah,
and never missed one. But he's more than that. He's a good, hard-working, left-sided attacking player. And he's mid-20s now, Oyarzabal, isn't he? And
I think,
so a regular with Spain as well, decent bit of pace. So he is a bit of everything. Very good player, Oyarzabal. So yes, but I think he's the key player really for Real Sociedad at the moment with David Silva. So I think you're looking at a lot of money. I mean, I haven't said that. Arsenal paid 72 million, wasn't it, for Pepe? So
you never know.
Yeah, so you never know. You really do never know.
Yeah. So that kind of concludes the Isco chapter of the show. There's a couple more things I wanted to talk about before we go. One of them is on Lucas Torreira. He moved to Atleti, and from reading the pieces that I've from the Athletic and from Sky and some other journalists out in Spain, he was apparently sold this kind of idea that he'd be playing next to Thomas Partey for Atleti. Now that obviously hasn't worked out because of Arsenal coming in and nicking him. How has he done? And I know what the answer to that is going to be, but why has it gone the way that it has for him?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the reservation is. Whether Simeone didn't really want him, I don't know. Why take a player and hardly play him? Yeah. I don't know. But then you could ask that question of football managers and football clubs around the world, couldn't you? Because the big game, the Madrid derby against Real Madrid. So he brought in Herrera to play, and that had an absolute stinker. Took him off at half time as a bigger defensive midfielder than Torreira, and so that didn't solve it. So even in that kind of game where he wanted to play more defensively, and you thought the energy would have been the answer to that, but he didn't pick him then. So he just seems to have a huge reservation about him. It's the problem with signing for Diego Simeone is the truth of the matter. He is so strong at that club that. It's not like, and also, I don't know if there was a fee involved, a loan fee involved or not, but there's no pressure on him to play. That's the trouble with going in this kind of loan deal, is that you go and you got there, and they've got very, Saul didn't start in that game. They've got Koke playing in centre midfield. They've got Llorente, who is actually pushed further forward now. So they have very, very, very good players that he's competing with. Even with Partey having gone, because that's why Partey was available. That's because he had been in and out of the Atleti team for all of his obvious ability. He hadn't ever really 100% convinced Simeone. And so Torreira's gone in and has got the same problem. Basically, he could have just moved into Thomas Partey's house and adopted all of Thomas Partey's problems, convincing Simeone what his part was. So I guess when I've said he hasn't done anything wrong, I don't think that I don't think it will have affected his reputation particularly, because I don't think it particularly does go into Atleti and inverted commas failing, because I think people recognise how harsh a judge Simeone is. And that maybe he didn't run until he vomited one day in training, and so and then Simeone has lost faith in him ever since. That's the kind of standard that you're looking at. So will he stay? I would doubt it. Would be beyond the term of the loan. That's agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some rumours coming out that Arsenal might, or Atleti might choose to push him back to Arsenal in January and cut the loan short. I don't know how real those are, but I can't see Arsenal kind of agreeing to that with the
and he's played
quota.
he's played some games, hasn't he? I think he's played, because he's played a few European games. He's played, I think, about 5 La Liga games in total or something. So so he's not sitting there twiddling his thumbs doing nothing. He just hasn't been a central part of the team, which is the danger of going on loan, is that you sort of looks, perhaps thinking about it, whether they've just thought, oh, we've got a bit of a gap in the squad. Oh yeah, there's no fee to pay, or a small fee to pay, so we'll stick him in and fill a hole.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a case of Simeone kind of had this plan to play Torreira next to Partey, and had Partey stayed, Torreira may have suited playing next to him a lot more, and maybe that would have pushed Sal kind of out to the left-hand side, and we wouldn't see as much as we have as Thomas Lemar this season, and maybe Koke would have played out on the right-hand side. It's a case for me of I think it was very situational, of a plan that was built around Partey still being there, and then him leaving has kind of impacted that future.
Maybe so. But it's hard to say, isn't it? Because in a sense, Partey not being there, you would have thought would open up the opportunity to play against those really established names. But it's it hasn't worked out that way, has it? I don't know how much of a plan there is, if I'm honest. I sometimes think that there is a lot of making it up as you go along going on, and very few players are good enough or lucky enough to have a team built around them. And he's definitely not one of those. Definitely not when you're on loan. So I suspect that going to a big club on loan, that you just, the danger is that you're just there to fill a gap. You're just there to fill a hole, that they've looked at their squad and thought, oof, we're a bit short. Oh, is he? Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, go on, get him in. And it looks like that kind of signing.
Yeah, I really hope he comes back to Arsenal, to be honest, in the summer, and he's given a spot. We're losing a lot of foreign players from our quota with Socrates, Luiz, Mustafi, Ozil. All contracts are up in the summer. There's quite a few players going down to 1 year. Kolasinac is probably going to be sold as well. And I feel like there is an opportunity to get to, because when Torreira joined from Sampdoria, he was played under Emery in the deep defensive midfield role, and he did really well in that first kind of season. But then Emery had this strange idea to play him in a more advanced midfield role, with the idea of trying to win the ball into the opposition's half and hit them on the counter with less space between themselves when they win the ball back in the goal. But it just completely failed, because you had then Xhaka and Matteo Guendouzi playing, or one of those two playing deeper, and we were just turned over because Torreira wasn't there to do the little terrier running around, mopping up, intercepting all stuff, because he was further up the pitch and we just got bypassed. But with Partey, when we can actually get him fit, I feel like that could be a really dynamic partnership with two players that have got great coverage of the pitch, really good intercepting. Partey is really good in the transition and bringing the ball forwards. Torreira can be disciplined and sit in. And if we can get those two back, I don't feel there is a chance that Arsenal don't have to invest in another central midfielder, because they'd have Torreira and they could get him back to what he's capable of doing. But he didn't seem too happy at the club towards the end, and maybe he'll want to go. So kind of the last thing to talk about, and I want to get your thoughts on, is a kind of important Spaniard in the Arsenal setup, which is, of course, Arteta. From looking from the outside in, not as an Arsenal fan, how do you perceive things? Because being an Arsenal fan myself and having lots of people, Arsenal fans, in the chat watching the show, we're obviously very, very invested, and it's very difficult sometimes to look at things objectively without that kind of bias and passion and frustration with the situation. Do you think Arsenal are in a situation where the results are getting too bad to continue, or do you look at it as you've got a young, exciting coach, he's going to make mistakes, and maybe you need to persist with the rough until you finally get the smooth?
It's difficult. I don't have a ready-made answer, Tom, if I'm honest. Yeah. So factors would be, I think almost wherever, when anyone discusses sacking a manager, the question is, well, what would you do instead? So therefore, so that's a bad sign for Arteta, isn't it? Because obviously, with Klopp or Simeone, no one's having that discussion. There is no discussion as to what would you do afterwards. He's going nowhere. So Arteta might go somewhere. That is the truth of the matter. Is Arteta the right man for the job? No, I wouldn't have picked him at the time, because I just thought Arsenal, when we were discussing, we had a long chat about Mesut Ozil, didn't we, previously?
We did,
because
with your book, which, by the way, I'll put a link in the description to if people want to check that out.
Oh, thank you very much. So in my book, there is I sort of discuss how Ozil is it's not just about Ozil, is it? Arsenal basically rejigged how they did things. They chose not to compete with the mega money of other clubs, so it caused some problems. Now, I don't think Arsenal's had great sporting leadership for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think you wind the clock back to then. So I think a lot of people now. I'm on an Arsenal channel. I'm going to go there. Right, Wenger. So this bad run of results that Arsenal are in. I've seen loads of national journalists and not Arsenal fans saying, almost, that's what you get for sacking Wenger. But to me, that's a misunderstanding of the situation. In my view, Wenger should have gone earlier because. Now, he might have been a genius covering up the lack of interest from the ownership, in which case, sort of well done. But the trouble with it's almost like a charitable venture, therefore, isn't it? That you actually go and fix the problem. Is the problem. You go and look at the fundamental problems, and the fundamental problem with Arsenal is that the leadership of the club are not invested enough in the sport. They don't know enough about the sport. They don't have a sporting plan. And so therefore it's like, so sacking Arteta now would be, we'll sack Arteta. And then the worst thing that clubs ever do, they sack a guy and then they go, like, Everton would be a classic example of having done this so many times over the years, that you sack a guy and now where? What are you going to do, Marco Silva? Yeah, precisely.
We waited I think it was like 4 weeks until we actually appointed Arteta after we got rid of Emery. It wasn't a case of we knew that was where we were going to go. Arteta was at Manchester City, was sitting on the bench as he watched Kevin De Bruyne rip us apart, and we lost 3-0 at home. And then the next day, you've got the people like Vinay and Edu going up to Manchester to speak to Arteta. So it wasn't like a done thing that he was going to be the candidate. And that's what I worry about with Arsenal, is that if we sack Arteta, you go, well, where now? I get your point in saying that you don't think that with Klopp and Simeone, because there is no option to get rid of them because they're doing a great job. But with Arteta, in a way, there's kind of similarities that you go, well, I don't think that, because I don't know where the club would go. A lot of people would happily throw out names like Allegri or throw out names like Pochettino. Pochettino's never going to come to Arsenal. Allegri might come to Arsenal, but if Arsenal are very bored with the style of football you're seeing at the moment, you're going to be equally as unentertained with the style of football that Allegri will play. And
you won't get Allegri without a plan. Now, what he wouldn't do, because he's got his reputation, because he's got his names, because he's got his trophies in the cabinet, he is not an Allardyce. He's not the fireman to come and get you out of a relegation scrap. He would. So, Arsenal is a major club with a major reputation. So he would say, right, okay, in Arsenal, I'm interested. What's the plan? Where are we going with this club? What's the future? What's the direction? How do you want to play? How do you want to build the club? And until Arsenal have got those answers, just chopping and changing managers isn't the problem but this is where the expression results business comes in, because what is it now? 2 points from 6 games. So if it becomes 4 points from 12 games, and then you start thinking, hang on, well, that relegation zone's a bit close.
It is now.
Then it becomes a different conversation, doesn't it? And then it might be, thank you, Mikel. I'm sure you've got your plans. I'm sure you've got your vision and all of that, but it's just too inexperienced. That was always the problem. It was too big a job. Given that the club doesn't have a brilliant direction, you needed. So therefore, if you become massively reliant on the individual of the manager, which was, as I say, that's sort of what I was going to with the Wenger. It became too reliant on the individual, one person, dragging and driving the whole thing, because there was no real direction from above. And so that's where Arsenal are. That is the club that Arsenal are at the moment. And so giving the wheel to an inexperienced guy was a huge gamble. And he doesn't, the other factor in whether he goes or not becomes within a few games, because you look into his eyes and you start, and his post-match interviews, and it's becoming painful. It's a hugely stressful job. Again, I look at Klopp raving like a lunatic on the touchline. You see Pep the other day when the fourth official tried to put the board up, and he was like wrestling it with his hands. The pressure that these guys are under is just incredible, isn't it? And to do that when you don't have the experience, I think is very, very hard. But so for now, I think you stick with him, and you hope that no one gets themselves sent off, and you hope that no one scores an own goal, and you hope that you get a few goals. But as I say, Arsenal's, for me, as the outsider, Arsenal's major fix is to fix the proper sporting direction of the club from above the Edu level. So you're looking at the people who actually own the club, the people who have the money. Yeah. So what are they doing? And I can, I share your frustration, because until that is sorted out, you're running in mud until that's sorted out. It's very hard to fix anything else.
It's interesting because I mean, I don't know how obviously integrated you are with knowing about Arsenal from behind the scenes.
Go on, tell me.
Like, there's a guy called Tim Lewis that's been brought in by the Cronkies over the last, say, year, and he's a legal guy. He works as a lawyer for a firm. I believe it's an American firm, but I think he's English. And he's come in and effectively he's acted like the Sherlock Holmes of Arsenal. Like, he's investigating the issues at the club. He had a hand in Raul Sanyehi's dismissal. He's had a hand in a lot of the redundancies that have been made. And apparently it's through, he's like the Cronkies man on the ground now, trying to find out what is going wrong with their business, their company, which they have. It's interesting you bring up Wenger, because I look at like the period at which Wenger left, which I think was 2017. And that period of time where we handed away from Wenger, we moved to where we are now. And if you look at what happened, Arsenal as a business could not have had a more turbulent period of change of hands, of change of people at the top, because Wenger was basically a man with his fingers in every single pie in the world of Arsenal. And then you had Ivan Gazidis come along and became the club CEO towards the latter end of Arsene Wenger's tenure. Ivan Gazidis sort of oversees the passing of the reins from Arsene Wenger to whoever's going to take over. Ivan Gazidis brought in Raul Sanyehi. He brought in Sven Mislintat, who's now at Stuttgart and was at Borussia Dortmund as kind of the big recruiter. And then you've got Vinay Ventukasham, who'd been at the club previously, but that was then promoted to kind of head of the commercial side of things. Wenger goes, Emery comes in, things don't go well. Ivan Gazidis leaves within less than a year, I believe, of Arsene Wenger leaving. So that's your CEO now gone after Wenger's gone. He went off to AC Milan. And then you've got promoted in his place Raul, who's only just joined and is notoriously, I don't want to use the word dodgy as an allegation, but there are underlying concerns around the man. You've got Vinay Ventukasham, who's 40 years old, was 38, 39 at the time, was head of commercial side of things at Arsenal. And then we had Sven Mislintat, who was the big recruiter, who now is at Stuttgart doing an amazing job, got them up to 7th with the recruitment that he's helped. I think they've got an American coach now. Get them up to 7th in the table from the Bundesliga second tier last season. He left because he felt, in his words, that there was a different direction that the likes of Raul Sanyehi wanted to go in compared to him, and he didn't have the influence that he wanted at the club. So Raul Sanyehi basically has a war of attrition with Sven, which he wins. Sven leaves. You then have Emery go, and we then have a break, and Arteta comes in. And around that time, we'd already brought Edu in to replace Sven Mislintat, who is very much like Raul, in which he's friends with agents, like Kia Jarabchin, for instance, and as much more kind of the same thinking as Raul. But then Raul gets sent away by this Tim Lewis guy that's come in through the Cronkies. And then Vinay Ventukasham, who is the head of commercial at that point, becomes the Ivan Gazidis. And he becomes the kind of CEO of everything, when he previously had nothing really to do with the football side of things. So and that's all that I've described there is in a case of 3 years. And that shows the level. And now you've got Josh as well. Josh Kroenke, who's meant to be Stan's guy on the ground, his son. You've got Josh, who's 40, Vinay, who's 40, Edu, who's 42, and Arteta, who's 38. Raul has gone. He was an older senior figure. And you've got this collection of very young senior people running one of the biggest football clubs in the world. And to me, it's no surprise that we're at the situation that we're now in.
Yeah. So here's the big question then for Tim Lewis: is if you are hired by Stan Kroenke to come and tell me what the problem is at this football club, the fundamental problem. If the fundamental problem is you are, mate, then how brave are you? Do you go back and say, it's you. It is. It needs to be better direction from the very, very top. Now, it's a good sign, I suppose, that he's hired someone to have a look at that. But the trouble, I've worked in organisations before that have gone wrong, and what you end up with, because the big boss is getting stuff wrong. You end up with it's like with warlords fighting underneath because the king isn't doing the job properly, and so that's what it sounds like. I've heard you reference this before, Tom, where it just sounds like various people fighting their battles. Agents are a blight on the world of football, but that's the reality of where we are. So Arsenal are not unique, and Arsenal can't solve that problem on their own. So you need, and then the obvious answer is, everyone always points at Bayern Munich. So, get some old players, but Edu, of course. It is not a magical solution, is it? Getting Ian Wright in would not magically make Arsenal run better than it is run at the moment.
Lives there now, so
right, okay, right. But until it gets better sports leadership and a proper direction, and then the coaches are picked for their part that they would play, and no individual leaving would leave a chasm in the way that Wenger leaving left this black hole. Then then you're reliant on having a bit of luck. Now, it's always possible that you get a bit of luck. It's always possible that you get 2 or 3 good signings in a row. Even Barcelona, with their terrible signing problem, they signed Pedri. So bang, they're suddenly, you can do it. It is possible. You can appoint a manager who gets a run of results. These things can turn around. That's the beauty of football. Yeah. But we and I know we're sort of discussing some long-term problems with Arsenal, and I know I'm not offering much optimism. So yeah, but yeah, so but it can be turned around. And the name of Arsenal is big enough, and the fan base is big enough that there will always be people looking from the outside in thinking, I could have a crack at that. I could solve that. I could do something there, which is always the source for optimism.
It's to kind of finish the show about Arteta. That's why I'm more kind of willing to not chop and change, because there has been so much chop and change at the club that maybe stability is what we need, and maybe results will suffer and we won't get in Europe this season. I think that's almost a guarantee at this stage that Arsenal aren't probably going to qualify for Europe this season. But if we can keep the guy in charge, if we can get out some of the toxic individuals in the club, both in the playing staff and maybe some of the senior figures in the club, then we might be in a better position. I mean, people in the chat box suggest the likes of Nagelsmann at RB Leipzig, Jesse Marsch at Red Bull Salzburg, and the thing is, on the surface, those guys at those clubs are doing great things, but they have got the backing behind them with the club with the same mindset as they do, and the players already there with the same kind of rhetoric that they've wanted to achieve the things that they're achieving. And at Arsenal, that's just simply not the case for Arteta, and it is going to take time for it to change. But what Arsenal need is stability. Interestingly, Tashi Tenzing in the chat points out Monchi, and actually he turned Arsenal down. There was a point when he was leaving Roma and he went off to back to Sevilla, but Arsenal were courting him before Edu, and he turned the Arsenal things down to return to Sevilla. Obviously, Sevilla is a very familiar place for him, but that could have changed things for Arsenal. I feel he's someone that would have been the recruiter that we need.
Yeah, if I don't know if I've recommended this before on the channel, Tom, but there is the Monchi Masterclass, 13-minute videos where he describes how he does the whole recruitment process. It's long and it's detailed, and there's an amazing amount of hard work goes into it. And it's not perfect. Sevilla still signed the odd turkey here or there. They're still not doing particularly well this season. They're quite dull to watch, actually. But there is a process there. Now, I don't think just grabbing a guy, as you say, rooted in southern Spain. So why he would suddenly want to come and live in London, where it's outside now, the rain is lashing my window and it's dark in the middle of the day. So he might not want to come. I understand. But that's what Arsenal need, the English Monchi. That's what Arsenal need. A direction, a long-term plan where they're recruiting players over the course of a couple of years. It's not, hang on, such and such an agent has rung up and such is available. Let's get him in. That's the kind of business that English clubs have done too much of, and that's where the vast sums of money has been wasted and burned away. Is a lack of long-term plan. So one thing Arsenal need is the English Monchi, or it doesn't have to be English, but you have to be rooted in the English game. You have to know everything about the English game, and then stick with Arteta. I'm with you, but it's a results business, and he doesn't have, he doesn't have another 6 bad games in him. I don't think.
No. and we'll just have to wait and see the Everton game as we talked about. I'm going to preview that a little bit later today as well. It's the team selection for that will, I think, dictate kind of some of the confirmations we have around Arteta and the way he's picking the team. There's rumours around Willian and Louise I'm going to discuss later as well, which is interesting. But it's been a pleasure to speak to you, John. Really appreciate your time this morning to talk about Isco and your very honest thoughts on the disastrous situation of my club. Appreciate
There's promise. There is hope, Tom. There is always hope. A big club always has hope.
It does. Thank you ever so much in the chat for listening. If you would like to check out more of John's work, you can listen to La Liga Weekly, which is, of course, a fantastic podcast all around Spanish football. It keeps you up to date with all the stuff with Terry Gibson, which I know has a Spurs link, but ignore that because he has a fantastic knowledge of the game and Spanish football in particular. So check that out. And you can check out John's book, The 50 Most Influential Footballers, which includes Mesut Ozil, which you may split opinion. We talked about it on the show before. We've had an interview about it, so you can check that out. A link for that is in the description. So if you could drop a like on the video, I'd really appreciate it. You can follow John on Twitter at Driscoll FC. You can follow myself at The Gooner Talk TV or at Tom Canton Media. I will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.